There was something sparked early in me that I just liked this idea of kind of controlling my own destiny. Well, I was told I had hired a business coach and kind of a personal coach as well at one point, and he did a behavioral personality assessment on me, and he told me that if I ever had ambitions of retiring on a boat and drinking a margarita, to get rid of them now because I would be divorced, addicted, and miserable, is the way he put it.
One of Four Loko's creators, Chris Hunter.
All right, thanks for having me, Seth. Let's do it.
Chris is most known for founding Four Loko during his dorm college and converting it into a multi-billion-dollar alcoholic beverage company. Now Chris is also the co-founder of KOIA, a 100% plant-based protein drink company, which makes over $200 million in annual sales.
I just believed I could do this and I could do it better than other people were doing it. And so that's what kind of gave me, I guess, the motivation to do this, and I'd always wanted to do something on my own. And when I really knew that it was real, because I had ideas all the time, but I will say, just pressing through that, we knew that that was our opportunity. And so when you get national distribution at a retailer like Whole Foods, you have to show that it works.
Hello everyone, I'm very excited for this interview. We have a great person, a great entrepreneur, a great innovator. And it's basically Chris Hunter. Chris is most known for founding Four Loko during his dorm college and converting it into a multi-billion-dollar alcoholic beverage company. Now Chris is also the co-founder of KOIA, a 100% plant-based protein drink company, which makes over $200 million in annual sales. Chris is also the author of Blackout Punch, an entrepreneurial journey from chaos to clarity, which I'm very excited because I'm going to read it 100% and then give you feedback through my social media. And in summary, Chris is one of those few individuals that has revolutionized the whole industry worldwide and has done it twice. So thanks, Chris, yet again for making this happen and wanting to connect with Spanish-speaking young entrepreneurs.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to chat.
Thank you, thank you. So, Chris, I wanted to start with getting to know a little bit what were your initial steps into entrepreneurship. I saw a little bit on the back of the book where there's a very clickbaiting thing, but yeah, how were your first steps with entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a lower middle class, very blue collar family, and so there weren't many entrepreneurs that I knew. I had one uncle who's a general contractor in the construction business, but for the most part, it was my family and people around me were working traditional jobs, and there was something sparked early in me that I just liked this idea of kind of controlling my own destiny. I say to people that I think I've always been a little bit unemployable, and I think any entrepreneur probably can relate to that. And so my entrepreneurial venture started really early. I don't know if they're typical things or not, but kid level entrepreneur stuff, the lemonade stand, selling candy on the bus, selling pictures out of coloring books. But as I got a little older, I found more creative ways to bring that to life, and that was starting or selling bootleg products at a flea market, or even taking a role with Cutco Knives, which was door-to-door sales of knives. So it was really kind of entrepreneurial in that respect. And then as I got into college, I just, a new world was unveiled to me when I moved to Columbus, Ohio. It was a bigger town. And I just saw people doing creative things like nightclub promotions, which I started to do, or I started a magazine in college. And so a couple different things that I think got me going. And then after college, I wasn't sure what I was going to do until I took a job. And I think part of that path was taking some of these jobs was about learning what I wanted to do as much as what I didn't want to do, right? Some of the jobs I took, I just said, this will not be my career forever, but it paid the bills, and that's okay too.
And what would you say it's the driving thing that brings you into entrepreneurship? So ever since you were little and now, is there an overall ambition? Do you see yourself stopping and like enjoying the revenue you've committed, or what's your ambitions in general? What moves you towards entrepreneurship?
Well, I was told I had hired a business coach and kind of a personal coach as well at one point, and he did a behavioral personality assessment on me, and he told me that if I ever had ambitions of retiring on a boat and drinking a margarita, to get rid of them now because I would be Divorced, addicted, and miserable is the way he put it. And so the traditional idea of retirement is not really that interesting to me. I think for me, it's how deep am I going to be in operations, because I always want to be involved in doing things, because I think what really motivates me is creating. I mean, that the inception to creation is really invigorating, and it's really testing, and it's very difficult. Scaling is a lot of fun to me as well. What's not really that fun to me is kind of just the standard everyday maintaining of a business or company. That's probably why I didn't enjoy traditional jobs. I like the variability that comes along with entrepreneurship. Now, I say that now. There are some days that I think to myself, what am I doing? What did I do? What did I get myself into? And other days I'm riding high. So it definitely is a roller coaster. But I enjoy the creating part.
I love that about being a roller coaster. So bring us through the process of creating your first more or less serious, let's pick that venture, which is or was Four Loko. How was that process? How did you get into the physical product? How was that journey?
Yeah, so the first step that actually happened, and I think a lot of times in life, when you look back in retrospect, everything kind of makes sense and it lines up, right? Which brings you to the current point. And so for me, that looked like when I was in college, as I mentioned, I ran a nightclub promotions business, and I knew all the bar and nightclub owners in the city. And there was a guy who was part of a new startup vodka company, and he came into town and he wanted to present to all those buyers. And through his broker, he reached out to me and they said, can you take him around and introduce him? Well, for me, there was no compensation for that. It was just really interesting, and I was curious on how this worked. And so I did. I took him to multiple places, introduced him, and watched him pitch his brand. And so nothing came of that. I just kind of filed it away. Good learning. I kept his business card, and so I believe in the value of networking. And we didn't have any contact for, probably 2 years. When I moved to Chicago, I was doing a couple odds and end jobs to kind of pay the bills, and I started digging through my old business cards, and I found his, and I thought, I remember him pitching vodka. I think that would be a fun job. I think I could do it. And I was just tenacious. I just bugged him until he gave me a job. And the point of that is that helped me learn the industry. So I essentially got a paid education. I didn't pay. They paid me, and I got an education, right? And I learned the alcohol industry over the course of 2 years. And as I was in that, I was just paying attention to what was happening. I was, first of all, a consumer. I would go out a lot, and I would drink Red Bull and vodka all the time. That was one thing. Two was the vodka I was selling was a flavored vodka that was primarily being mixed in with Red Bull. And so this idea of alcohol and energy was nothing new, but it made sense to me. And then I looked and I said, I am kind of in a position where I have a little bit of knowledge and enough resources, not money, but enough resources in terms of contacts, that I should do this. And I think to jump into an entrepreneurial venture, you have to have a little bit of, naive. You have to be a little bit naive, right? You can't if you knew how hard it was going to be, you would never do it. And so I just believed I could do this, and I could do it better than other people were doing it. And so that's what kind of gave me, I guess, the motivation to do this. And I'd always wanted to do something on my own. And when I really knew that it was real, because I had ideas all the time, but when I could just not stop thinking about bringing this idea to life, that's when I knew I had to do it. So I decided I was going to do it. I called my future business partner, but old college friend, Jeff, and asked him if he wanted to do it. He said yes, and we started part-timing it. So we both kept our jobs, and we started working on how do you put this thing together. And I share all the details in my book, but just high level, basically just had to learn how do you actually even make a drink. And so we had ideas of what we wanted. We wanted caffeine and alcohol. We knew that, but how do you formulate it? And through a lot of conversations, we found out that there are these things called flavor houses that you can pay to make, the actual formula for whatever it is that you want to create. And so we did that. And then just again, kind of continuing to be curious and ask questions. Great, we have a formula now, but how do we actually produce this product? And we found out there were these things called co-packers. And so we didn't have to buy a brewery. We didn't have to, make it in our kitchens or something. We could pay these people to do it professionally. And so those were really important steps for us to really be able to make something. All of that was great, but now we had to go sell the product. And so at least in the US, the alcohol industry is a 3-tier system. So we, as suppliers, the people that make the drinks, have to sell to distributors who then sell to bars or retailers, and then the customer obviously buys it there. And so I had to figure out a distributor. And again, luckily through contacts and paying attention, I had made some connections within a beer distributor in Columbus, Ohio, and I went back and pitched them. And so those were kind of the 3 big steps to getting into business. Now, what I'll say is once we got into business, we're all high-fiving and we're excited. Our other partner, Jason, had joined the company by then. But that was just the beginning. That really didn't do anything for us except for give us the opportunity to build a company. Because for the first 2 years, we were on the verge of going out of business every month.
Of course. And getting into that, what were your main focus, would you say, on the first year of activity? Or was it the same as it's the main focus of KOIA, like in recent years? Like, basically the question would be, like, if you launched Four Loko again today, would you do something differently? Or would you have to do even something differently due to the market today? Or how would you
So looking back, I think the only thing I would have done differently is understood that how the 3-tier system worked even better. Because what happened to us is we initially got very excited that we were generating all this revenue and we were selling it into distributors. And I knew we had to get it out of the distributors into the stores. That makes sense. And I knew how to do that. But what wasn't happening is those stores were not continuing to repurchase, at least not on a fast enough pace to make our business sustainable. And so it took us almost 2 years to realize that we did not have a product market fit. We had this product called Four, the concept was the same, but it really wasn't working. And so I probably would have paid attention earlier to the key metric, I believe, which is velocity. It's how many items are selling out of that same store per day, per week, per month, whatever that metric is. I'll contrast that with KOIA. When we launched KOIA, we launched it with Whole Foods nationwide, and our number one focus was sampling in those stores to make sure that people tried the product first of all, bought it, and then monitoring how sales went in the following weeks. And what we would see there is we would see a big spike in sales when we were sampling. We expected that to happen. We would see a slight drop off when we stopped sampling. Expected that to happen as well. But what the key we were looking for is, were those sales at a new level, at a sustainable level after we did the sampling. And once we saw that, we knew we had a product that we could scale. And so I applied the learnings from the first one to the second one, and we were able to scale much faster. Going back to your second part of that question, could I do it the same now? There's a few different ways to think about that. The short answer is no. I couldn't do what we did with Four Loko now, and there's a few different reasons. One, when we launched Four Loko or Fusion Projects, I at the time was 25 years old. My partners are basically the same age. Life was very different, right? I didn't have kids. I didn't have a lot of overhead. I didn't own a home. I didn't, all these things. And so my life for a while looked like I was a road warrior. I would leave my house on a flight on Sunday. I would be in a new market all week. I would be working late into the night on follow-up emails. I would come back Friday night, try to fit my life with my friends and girlfriend in 2 nights, and I'd go do it again. I could not do that at this phase of my life. I do think that that was absolutely required for us to be as successful as we were in the time frame that we were. The other essential was there were 3 of us. And so with 3 of us, equal partners, kind of covering the country and covering different responsibilities, all with the same vested interests, I think we had a competitive advantage. Now later in the company, that would come back to bite us and me particularly, but it was really helpful in those early days.
And Chris, one question regarding to that. What was the team like for this? Let's imagine young entrepreneur who's listening, who's getting into the mass consumer business. What team was it like for Loko in the beginning? Was it a small team, a big team? And what kind of profiles were the first employees that you needed to hire? Like what were your responsibilities of each partner?
Yeah, so there were 3 of us, and all 3 of us weren't even full-time at first. So I was doing this job essentially selling alcohol anyways. So I said, hey, I'll switch and do this for our company as long as we can match my salary. And my two partners, for a little while, not for long, kept their jobs and part-timed it. And one was in charge of production and logistics, kind of all the back end stuff. The other was in charge of finance, and I was just really out selling. Relatively quickly, they came on board full time as well, and we kept the company divided that way: finance, ops, and ops in all aspects, and sales and marketing. What we quickly evolved to is that all three of us had to be selling in some way, because that was the lifeblood of the company. And so we hired a few interns initially, many of them unpaid. They worked for us for a few months for free. Once we were able to pay them, we did. And so they were very young and inexperienced, but they were hustlers, and that's what we needed. Throughout that first 2 years, we had to let them go. So it was back down to the three of us. We were on the verge of going out of business. And then as we started to build the company, we really tried to outsource as much as possible. So we had an outsourced CFO company that did all the accounting and bookkeeping. We had outsourced our freight brokerage. We had a guy who would kind of bid out all of our freight, because we would ship a lot of loads per day, per week, per month. And so we had somebody doing that. Really, it was an outsourced model until we started generating enough revenue that we could hire. And then again, we started hiring in sales, because it was kind of the beginning of the flywheel for us. So we never, in those early days, were heavy on the back end stuff: marketing, ops, finance, production. Like, all of that was outsourced. From a marketing perspective, we only really focused on in-store awareness. And so it was very thin for a long time.
Oh, that's great. I wanted to snap into both finances and distribution real quick. So, most of mass consumer businesses do need like external, like raising funds basically from banks and that. So my first question would be, did you like bootstrap the company, or that you needed like resources from outside? How was that? And then what are investors looking at when showing interest into companies such as Four Loko in those stages, for possible selling the company or for getting equity in the company? And then, I'll ask you another thing on distribution.
Sure. So I'll talk about both. So with Fusion, which is Four Loko, fortunately, no one would really give us money. I mean, my partners, Jason and Jeff, got their family to invest a little bit that got us going. At one point, we did bring in one small investor. They owned about 6% of the company. And in those early days, you're really selling a dream, right? You can build these amazing decks and these amazing models and kind of sell the vision, but you have to have an investor just believe in you and believe in what you're trying to bring to life. And I say, fortunately, people wouldn't invest in us because it forced us to be scrappy. I think one of the mistakes we made looking back is that we did everything that everyone told us to do. We bought t-shirts, we ran incentives, all these things that we did, and none of them really worked because we didn't have the right product market fit. If we had more money, we would have spent more money doing the wrong things. So I think the scrappy nature of it is really valuable, because until you figure out exactly what works, you don't want to pour more money into it, and that forces that. On KOIA, we took a different approach. And one of the things that allowed that is that I had a track record. So coming off of Four Loko, I had people willing to invest in me. We had a small proof of concept. We had some early traction in about 20 stores in Chicago, and that was under a different brand name. It was called Raw Nature 5. But as I came in to co-found KOIA and pivot that company, we presented kind of those findings and that data, and then our plan moving forward. And so it was still a bit of a, hey, we're going to bet on you. A lot of the investors told me at the beginning, like, okay, fine on the product and the company, but we're betting on you, And so I think that track record really helps. As we raised a lot more money throughout KOIA, which we raised a significant amount, it then became kind of the data showing the sales trajectory, our plan showing where we're going and how we're going to get there. And that detailed everything from retail sales expansion to increasing velocity to the back end, to how are we going to increase margins, break profitability, go into different categories, all that kind of stuff. And so what I learned from fundraising, I hadn't done it at Fusion. I wanted to do it in KOIA. I'm good. I don't want to do it anymore. It's a very difficult, cumbersome thing, especially in the current market. But you just have to create a story in a situation that you really believe in, and you have to sell through passion, and then you have to deliver on what you said you were going to do. And once you do that, investors are happy to keep supporting you.
That's great. I also want to drop into the distribution part. What's the process into breaking into national distribution like 7-Eleven, Starbucks, Whole Foods? When you penetrate the market, would you recommend like one flavor, one reference, or several at the starting? How do you see that?
Yeah, so
I imagine it's different for Loco initial to KOIA initial, but
yeah. So I'll talk about KOIA. So with KOIA, it's a little bit different because we would go directly to the retailers, and that's who we would present to. And then we're kind of distribution agnostic. I don't care if Whole Foods wants to buy it from UNFI, which is who they do. It's a distributor here in the US that's a broadliner, what we call broadliner. Or if they wanted to buy through what's called a DSD, a direct store distributor. Doesn't matter to me. I want Whole Foods to say, yes, we want it, and then tell me who they want to get it distributed through, and then we'll set it up. And so that's what we did. We presented directly to Whole Foods. The way we even got that meeting was we had a key partner and broker that worked closely with Whole Foods come on board. And so we paid them an ongoing commission. They set up the meeting. They helped coach us in terms of what Whole Foods would want to see. And then we presented. And then we were very fortunate that this partner was also willing to invest in our company, and he really went to bat for us with Whole Foods. And so that's how we got our first national launch. It didn't go smooth. There were plenty of issues with that, but I will say, just pressing through that, we knew that was our opportunity. And so when you get national distribution at a retailer like Whole Foods, you have to show that it works. If it works, now you have a store to go to every other retailer. It makes things very easy. Not easy, much easier. If it doesn't work in that first retailer, you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out your plan of attack, because now I can't go to you and say, hey, Whole Foods is selling it nationwide and it worked. I was talking with one other beverage entrepreneur, and he had an interesting kind of model that he used when scaling a beverage. He said, I would have conversations with everybody. I would have conversations with 7-Eleven, with Costco, with whoever. And he said in every meeting, I wouldn't lie. I would tell them I was having conversations with. I would never say I was in, but he would say that name dropping always really helped. He had a distributor lined up, and so he kind of took a different path, saying, hey, I can get it here. The distributor already has it. I'm talking to these other retailers, and you don't want to miss out. And that was the approach he used. So I think either way, you have to be a bit scrappy and figure out your first win to build some momentum.
Yeah, scrappy also equivalent to creative, basically. But yeah.
Absolutely.
And so in initial stages, when starting a mass consumer company, your target audience could potentially be on several environments: supermarket, music festivals, gyms, convenience stores, e-commerce. So of course, if you have lots of resources, I imagine it's going for all of them. But let's imagine if you have smaller resources, would you recommend, like, how do you know where to choose, or would you recommend like going for them all in small scale? How do you see that in general?
Yeah, I think it depends on your plan. So I'll use a few examples. There's a friend who built a brand called IQ Bar, which is a protein bar with nootropic, like cognitive enhancement ingredients. And he told me I only focus on 10 customers. They're just the 10 largest customers. That's it. I don't talk to anybody else. I don't buy, because there's not a high enough return available in those other customers. You might be able to justify that they give you good exposure or awareness, but that's not what he was driving for. He's keeping a small team and he wants to maximize revenue. I think how you pick that is you look at the category that you're selling, right? And then you choose what you want to be. So, for us, for Four Loko, the idea there was that we almost substituted a liquor occasion. And what I mean by that is, like, beer in the US is sold in certain locations in some states, and in other states it's sold everywhere. And liquor is sold usually in less locations. Since Four Loko was flavored and kind of mimicked like a mixed drink, that was our angle. So that we knew that convenience stores were a really good opportunity, because someone might be looking for something like this, and it was a good alternative to going into a liquor store that they may not have as easy access to. for KOIA, we knew that the natural retailers would make sense, right? This was, at the time, relatively cutting edge. We were one of the first plant-based protein drinks. We were definitely, the leaders in that category. So we were going to start in natural, where the consumer was much more aware of that type of product, and we would expand out from there. There is value, though, if you think about, you mentioned music festivals, a competitive brand in the alcohol space right now, they really focused on those music festivals, and they have some key partners that allow them to get into those music festivals. Their proposition is very different, which gave them kind of a unique angle that the music festival would say yes to. And that's almost all their marketing. That's how they built all their awareness, all their trial. And now when they go to retailers, they say, look, we were just at a festival with 50,000 people all weekend. We sold X amount. You should stock us because those people are looking for it. So I don't know that there's a right or a wrong, but I think really understanding what your product is and who you want to target, and then looking at that category and where it really sells can help at least give you some directions to start to push on. I will say some of the biggest mistakes, the most costly mistakes we've made have been trying to be everywhere all at once.
That's nice. Just to close this topic, I would like to know if you were to give in order of importance in initial stages for a successful product. We're talking about the same things, which I think it's the basic ingredient, which is, let's say, sales, marketing, and distribution. So in those three, what would you give more importance to? Because I do think that some perhaps marketing strategies, you don't make money or don't even break even, or most cases lose money, but it's also important. In sales could also happen the same depending on the platform. But if you could order like sales, marketing, or distribution, what would be the most important? How would you see that?
So I think there's two different routes. If you want to take the route where you raise a lot of money and you're okay with burning that money, and you have a big kind of like binary option where it's either going to work or it's going to completely fail, and you're okay with that, then you can go the brand first route, which is marketing heavy, build awareness, sales will come. We'll turn this into a brand that everyone's looking for. I think like a Liquid Death might be an example of that, which is doing really well. The brand leads. If you want to go bootstrapped and you want to try to, essentially keep as much of the company as possible, you may grow slower. I think distribution is the key, because if the product's not available, no one can buy it. So I would start with distribution, then sales, and then go into marketing later. So depending on the model, I think there's a different route.
Great. So this is brought in from the back of your book, from the cover, which is, it says what you definitely should, or from the Amazon description, what you definitely should not do when launching a business. So I will discover the full answer when I read the book, but in a short answer, what's that you should definitely not do when launching a business?
Well, in the book, I share a lot of different stories, and many of the wins and kind of the stories along the way, but also the setbacks and the learnings, right? And so it's referencing a bunch of different stories shared there. But I will say, one of the things that I ran into was when we picked partners. When I asked my partners to be involved in the company. Sorry, my computer's about to die. Let me plug it in here. It was just because we were friends, and I had tried some businesses with one of them, and one had kind of what I thought was a complementary skill set. I went in very naively and just said, "Hey, we'll be equal partners, and that's fine," and wasn't really that kind of focused on the operational structure and agreement. And so, in retrospect, what I would do different is I would really think about what complementary skill set do we have before I ask people to partner. What is the appropriate kind of structure and split? It's easy to say it's even, but that's not always right. And I do think it was right in Fusion's perspective, but I'm just saying other people I've talked to, they might bring this partner on and then a few years in realize they're doing 70% of the work, but they only have 50% of the equity, right? So I think those are very important things. And maybe one of the most important things that I learned is figuring out how you get out when you get in. And so if you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, don't want to do this anymore, your life situation changes, me as an example, I'm married with kids and my life looks very different. if I don't want to do this anymore, how do we separate, right? Because you don't want to be stuck in a situation where there's infighting and it's very contentious. So that's one thing. I think spending a lot of time to put a business plan together, there is value to, but I think a lot of people get stuck in paralysis by analysis, and they want to make sure it's perfect. And the only thing you should know when you create that business plan is that the minute you finish it, it's going to be wrong, and that's okay. So I would say one of the things you should do is put a lot of work into it, but then just get started. Don't keep worrying about exactly how it's going to work, because it won't work that way. So you have to be adaptable and flexible.
On your book, you also cite on the description, from flying to private jets, then losing it all. So I ask you again in short, brief, how was that? Like the ups and downs, the roller coaster you talked about before?
Yeah, I mean, when we started Fusion for 2 years, as I mentioned earlier, we were almost out of business. And so this was our first business. We didn't know what else to expect, and that was fine. When we launched Four Loko 2 years into our company, it was a rocket ship ride. It grew crazy numbers in the course of 2 years. And so we were afforded these new luxuries. We took this international trip where we all flew on a private jet. And so there were exposure to a whole new world through what we had built. And then I woke up one day a few years later and was fired from that company by my two partners that I had brought together. And so when I say lost it all, it was like my identity was wrapped up in what I had created in Fusion Projects and Four Loko. I was so focused on that I really didn't know who else I was. I was the Four Loko guy, right? And so I lost all of that ability to be that person anymore. Now I've still co-founded that brand and still own a share of it just like my partners do, but I don't manage it at all. But it was a really rough path and awakening for me at that moment. So when I say lost it all, it wasn't that I was suddenly homeless and sleeping on the sidewalk. It was just that I had lost visibility, control, and even input into the company that I had built, and maybe access to some of those spoils, I guess you could say. The other thing that I think I lost was a bit of confidence. When you are riding high and things are really working, you feel like you're on top of the world and can almost do no wrong. And I feel like that's a false security, because that's not true. Just as much as when I got fired, I felt like I could do nothing right for a bit, and that's not true either, right? So it was definitely a difficult journey that took some introspection to come through.
Wow, great entrepreneurs and innovators like Steve Jobs also went through that, so that's crazy. So wanted to read the book also. Yeah. What would you say it's the ideal expansion strategy? Do you see international markets with KOIA now? What's the viral recipe you've put into both of the business, because they're clearly phenomena and have socials and have all this? So what would you see in?
Yeah, so one of the commonalities I would say is understanding what the product is and really emphasizing that, one, on pack, and then two, as you bring the product to life digitally or at events or through your marketing efforts. And so with KOIA, it's very clear. It's protein forward, it's low sugar, those are the attributes, and then it's delicious. And so that's what we lean in on. And I think that the simplicity of that message allowed us to scale it quickly, because it also allows you as the consumer to repeat that message to other people. So we can almost turn you into salespeople. We found out that the number one request we have at KOIA, so as KOIA lives today, it's a refrigerated beverage, which means it has to be kept cold from production all the way through to consumption. That has always made international expansion a little bit difficult. We've had plenty of requests for it, both in North America and overseas. We think it would make sense in some markets, especially in some Asian markets where there's a high consumption of plant-based or dairy alternatives. We just have not gone there yet. But the number one request we've gotten from our customers to date is, how do I buy it in bulk? Because they currently have to buy one bottle at a time from a retail location. And the second request we get is, how do I get it delivered? And so the exciting part for me when we talk about the future of the company is this actually just launched on Amazon. This is a shelf-stable version of KOIA. Same delicious flavors, 20 grams of protein, low sugar. It actually is fortified with 21 vitamins and minerals. And so launching on Amazon opens us up globally immediately, which is very exciting. And it comes in 12 packs. So that's the first expansion. We're actually doing some research and talking to some partners about potential international expansion. I don't know if or when we'll bring that to life, but we're always exploring it. There's a lot of opportunities still here in the U.S., so we still have, we still have some growth and some things to accomplish here.
Real quick, Chris, of the questions, personal question for me. I'm a marketer. Would you go, if you had to choose, of course, digital or in-store marketing? If you had to choose.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because I think it really depends, and I hate when people answer that way, but it does. It depends on what the product is. So one of the difficulties with KOIA is that it's a beverage, and so it's heavy to ship. And so a lot of times things that are heavy to ship don't scale as well digitally, D2C, Amazon, whatever it may be. I think that's changing. I think there was a lot of push towards all digital brands. We've seen that, kind of pendulum swing back to retail. I can tell you there's power in both. Many of the brands that I know that launched digital first built a huge awareness, and then when they came to retail, they were able to show that they had this giant following, a ton of awareness, and they were able to leverage that to get a lot more support from the retailers, major retailers like Walmart and Target. Us, on the other hand, we're selling over 2 million bottles a month. We're selling one bottle at a time in over 25,000 doors across the country, including Starbucks. We have a ton of exposure and brand awareness. So now that we launch online, we expect to break all kinds of records in terms of how fast and how wide we launch. So I can't say that one's better than the other. My wife just launched a company which is in the supplement space. She's going online exclusively, and I think that makes sense, right? So it really depends on the product.
That's great. So we have a couple of quick questions to end. The first one is, if you could give an entrepreneur one advice, what would it be and why?
Yeah, think a lot about your idea, understand what you're getting yourself into, make sure you're really passionate about it, and once you decide that this is the right thing to do, just do it. Just get started.
Great. Now, if you could give one child one advice, one life advice, what would it be and why?
I have 3 children, so I feel like I give a lot of advice. I don't know how much of it gets paid attention to, but I think that maybe the most important thing is just remain curious. I told one of my sons the other day that his answer seemed like he knew everything, and so why don't you ask more questions? Because it's always fascinating to me to see when you really listen and ask good questions based on what you're hearing, what new things you can learn and discover.
Totally. What are your takes on the education? So I saw a post on LinkedIn you published about the education system, more or less. You also talked about it in the beginning. So what are your takes on the education system? Does it need change? Not? How do you see it?
Well, I think that it could use some reform. I think there are options out there that are available. Look, I grew up going to public school. So I was afforded an opportunity when I was very young. I took a standardized test that I happened to perform well on, and I got put in these classes that, when I think back, those classes were nothing special. All they really allowed me to do was not regurgitate information that I was given, but to think critically for myself. And so we had to do research projects back in those days in encyclopedias, not online, debate them, do riddles. It just made me think different. And for my children, my oldest 2 went to what's called a Waldorf school. It's a different style of teaching, if people may be familiar with Montessori schools. And it really focuses on the children just being good people and learning good foundational skills. I think that's really important. It's not always easy because from a parent perspective, it takes patience. There were people whose children were reading before ours or doing things like that that are benchmarks for development. We had to be patient. What has happened is, as we focused on the foundational things of our children, now they love to read. Whereas, when I was forced to read as a kid, I didn't want to do it. So I love that kind of thing. I also believe strongly in giving opportunities that expand perspective. So I got to do an internship when I was in 5th grade. It was with a real estate company, but it just opened my eyes to how things could work. And so I try to give my kids exposure. It's easier than ever now. You can go online and watch a YouTube video, but exposure to a broader world is really important and valuable.
If you could drink 2 Four Lokos with any person, dead or alive, who would it be? And then if you could drink 2 KOIA products, dead or alive, who would it be? If it's the same person, then why? but
Let me think. Okay, if it were going to be Four Locos, it would have to be somebody who could share some really good stories once they had a buzz. So I think I would probably pick Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, I guess. I think he would share some wild stories. If I were to pick somebody with KOIA, I think it would be Peter Diamandis, currently alive, is a very fascinating person to me. His views on the future and his insights, and so I guess probably Peter.
great. Interesting would be to see what happens if it was the Four Loko with Peter.
Yeah, and I didn't think of people that were dead, so I just used those that I actually could.
That's great. Chris, is there any, just to end, life achieving big dream that you have that you would like to accomplish? I know, go to space or something that's outrageous perhaps, or delusional. What's your biggest dream in your life?
I don't know that I have one thing that I want to accomplish. I think what I want to accomplish is remaining curious and remaining motivated to achieve things, and so and to push myself. So when I turned 40, I went to Iceland and did cold water immersion and breathwork training. Like, that was something unique and exciting to me. I would love to do those kind of things. I told my son when he was talking about, he jokes with me, he's 11, he calls me old, I'm 45. And I say, okay, my dad was really young when I was born. My dad, I'm 45, he's 63. And I said, when I'm grandpa's age, if you want to run a marathon, I'll run it with you. So just continuing to do these things that kind of keep me alive, motivated, and living life to its fullest.
Sounds great. Just to end, one book or one movie or one song perhaps that you would like to share, or any of those?
From a book perspective, I think the first book that I read that really changed, opened my mind, was called The Celestine Prophecies. And it's not a business book. It's just kind of a perspective on the world view. I think there's a bunch of them. The Alchemist is a great one. When I was really trying to get into business and really change my life and trajectory, I read a classic, Think and Grow Rich, and I followed it to a T. So I think those are great ones that that were really valuable to me.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Chris. If you had one thing that, let's imagine that almost 8 billion people in this planet Earth are listening to you, what would you say? It could be a speech, a phrase, a quote, a mantra.
Yeah, I think just be open. Just be open and listen, because people always surprise and fascinate me when I'm willing to be open and listen.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for this, and it was a pleasure. Thanks for connecting with this community, Spanish-speaking entrepreneurial community, and hope to see you soon here in in Spain, or perhaps any place.
Maybe I'll take you up on that invite. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. I'm gonna stop recording now. Wait, give me a second.